Was supposed to be, we asked him to be here in London because he lives in London.
Yeah, exactly.
And guess what? He happens to be in New York. Joining us now, Professor of Security Studies at the Department of War Studies at King's College in London, Peter Neumann. He serves as Director of the International Center for the Study of Radicalization.
Peter, thank you so much for being with us. Obviously, we're getting a look at Jihadi John, and the New York Post headline says he's unmasked, and he's a nice boy from a good family is the quote. What does this tell us about the face of radical Islam?
It tells us that a lot of people started out being fairly normal people.
Right.
And they got radicalized. They went through a process that took them to where Jihadi John ended.
And we saw this also with the three young women who were model students who slipped off to Syria too. It's extraordinary.
I think it's learning.
It's wrong to, it's a fallacy to assume that everyone who gets radicalized is necessarily poor, uneducated, or crazy.
Right.
This affects normal people who are going through a process of radicalization, who are turned by recruiters, who are consuming propaganda, who are part of groups, and who are affected by events.
You know, Willie, for
like
the last
cult.
6 months, we've been assuming they're all sociopaths that are just cruel and want to destroy. No, I mean, they come from middle-class families, upper middle-class families, college degrees, and have a future in the West if they want it.
Yeah, we've seen it time and time again, and we also have read these pieces in the aftermath of this, in the aftermath of Paris, that say they were let down by the societies in which they live. In fact, blaming British society or blaming French society for not better integrating these people. What do you make of that argument?
So at my institute in London, we are following 700 of the foreign fighters, and we've had conversations with nearly 100 of them, often through social media. And what we found is there are all kinds of people. Some of them are middle class, some of them are poor. But what they all have in common is that they don't feel they have a stake in their society. And of course, if you don't feel you have a stake in your society, it becomes easier to go somewhere else, to leave your society, and ultimately to go against your society.
But a lot of people here in America feel like they don't have a stake in the society. They don't go and cut people's heads off.
What's happening?
What's the link there?
It's not grievance by itself doesn't turn anyone into a terrorist. It is where grievance meets an ideology. It is the nexus between the two. If you're aggrieved and someone speaks to you and offers all the answers to your questions, takes you into a different direction, that's when it hits.
So if I can just turn the conversation around, we keep saying, you know, what is it about the people who join ISIS? What's wrong with them? Are they poor? Are they disenfranchised? What is it about what ISIS is doing that is effective in recruiting people that are seemingly so normal? What is it?
How does this grab somebody out of a middle to upper middle class home in London?
Again, there's not one answer, but that particular thing, the brutality that we find so difficult to understand, it is almost like a counterculture. It is almost like if you feel sort of alienated, the most outrageous thing that you can do in this country and in European countries is to go there and to do that.
And we were talking earlier about sort of the social media tools that ISIS used to recruit its followers. How ubiquitous are they on social media, and what kind of tools are counterterrorism efforts bringing to the fight to counteract that, essentially?
So the interesting thing is, of course, ISIS is on the internet, but what makes ISIS so powerful, what gives it such an oomph on Twitter and on social media platforms, is the hundreds of grassroots followers who are not necessarily formally affiliated with ISIS, but who are pushing the message forward, who are editing. We call them fanboys. And the problem with the counter-narrative, problem with the counter-campaign is, whilst maybe the State Department can put out a couple of things, it doesn't have the oomph, it doesn't have that grassroots following that makes it go viral.
All right, thank you so much for being on the show, Peter Neumann. Good to meet you.
Thank you, Peter.
Up next, don't look now, but there is an energy revolution happening in America. We'll introduce you to one Texas town at the heart of this boom and the men and women who are on the front lines. Their stories next.